Welcome to Hot Topic. I'm Hugh Riches. On this election special, I'm joined by two of the candidates for Hull East. We did attempt to contact and invite all the other candidates, but for one reason or another, they couldn't come, including Karl Turner, the Labour incumbent. But I'm delighted to say that I'm with Richard Barrett for UKIP and Christine Mackay for the Conservatives. Richard, can I just start with you? UKIP is the new party. It's spoken of as revolutionising British politics. Is it just going to be a flash in the pan?
No, I don't think so. I think that people are floating from various parties that they've voted for in the past. We're picking up non-voters, and I think this election, especially this election, is going to be a very exciting one for everybody.
It's the definition of the party is that your central main policy, and perhaps the only one that's absolutely locked down, is that you want to withdraw the United Kingdom from Europe. And yet, so often, your representatives seem to be campaigning not on the European Union, but on migration.
Well, ultimately, migration is an issue. We definitely need to take control of our borders. When we've got 500 and 600,000 people coming through to this nation, it's got to a point where the size of a small city seems to be coming in without the infrastructure being put in place there. So ultimately, what we need to do is control them borders so that we can say, right, let's get the infrastructure in place. We're not against migration. We're not against people coming. We're not against talented people coming. But what we need to do is look at the skills that they possess to see whether they are positive for us as a nation.
Christine, you're a Conservative. That party is riven by argument about whether or not to stay in the European Union. You seem to have had an internal compromise about having a referendum in 2017 if there's a Conservative majority in the House of Commons. Just to establish and tie this down, you're a Conservative for or against Europe?
I'm a Conservative for a renegotiated settlement and then for Europe. So really in line with what David Cameron's talking about, and that is going to Europe, talking about trading, as you rightly said, cutting down on welfare benefits so that people want to come here to contribute and to work, but not just come to take advantage of the system. So
if you were to have that referendum in 2017, yes, how would you vote?
If I was happy with the renegotiation, I would vote in favour of staying in Europe.
And what would you want from Europe in that renegotiation? And what would you be willing to, negotiation is give and take, what would you be willing to take? What would you be willing to hand over to them?
Well, I'd be willing to take quite a lot, of course. I think really it's more about take than give. I know it's two-way, but it seems to me that Europe have taken rather a lot from us already. We've got so much red tape. We've got some of our small businesses are complaining about regulations, over-regulations, over-implementing regulations where other countries don't seem to be so rigorous in enforcing. So I think really we want to take back some of those take back ownership for some of those rules that apply to small businesses. But really the main thing is to look at welfare benefits. We're already now implementing policies that make us the strictest, in terms of what entitlement people have when they come to this country. But I think that's probably the key thing. I'm not in favour of a block on free movement of people. I'm happy for free movement of workers and people who want to contribute. And in fact, the legislation at the moment allows for free movement of workers. It doesn't allow for free movement of everybody who wants to come. So I guess...
Well, we could have free borders, as it were, without being in the European Union. Why not just do as Richard would wish, come straight out of the European Union? What benefits would we lose if we just unilaterally withdrew from the European Union?
Well, I mean, you just have to look locally at the job situation. I think that's the first thing is, I work for a large corporation and businesses take decisions on where to invest based on the access to the wider market. And obviously a lot of the manufacturing industry in the North East, for example, has positioned itself in the UK to give it access to the markets in Europe. Pulling out would put those jobs at risk.
I've got to disagree.
Of course.
I've got to disagree. I mean, ultimately, we're not saying that we don't want to trade with Europe. We're quite happy to trade with Europe. Norway and Switzerland, they benefit from not actually being within the European Union. They benefit from trading with Europe, but at the same time, they're not governed by them. And that's the issue. We need to stop being governed by the European Union that is wholly undemocratic. And I've got to say, Christine, that your party seems very mixed as far as the message that they want to get across. Half the party want to be in, half the party want to be out. It's not a great message when you're trying to go out there to the electorate to say what you stand for. From 2010, you've reneged on this, you've reneged on that. It seems that you only want to come with promises and then get elected and then go and take a U-turn on things.
You cite, forgive me, Christine, at one point, you cite Norway there. Norway isn't in a particularly happy position. It's trading with Europe and having to pay great fees to trade with Europe, while at the same time not being represented at the tables where the policies and decisions of Europe are made.
Well, at least they've got control of being able to make their own decisions, and that's the problem that we don't have back in Westminster. 60 and 70% of the directives that come from Europe seem to just go through because Westminster are not in control of them, and that's what we need to control.
Okay, so my answer to you on the referendum is the Conservatives are the only party who trust the electorate to make up their minds about it. You are quite clear, if you are in power, we come out of Europe.
Christine, you said this in 2010.
The Lib Dems, you know, they're quite clear, they'll keep us in. We are the only party who give voters a choice. You won't give them a choice, we're out. If you're in power, we are out. The Conservatives will go to the electorate and ask them, and it's quite true that there are differences of opinion. The Conservative Party is a broad church, no question about it. But again, it goes back to trusting the electorate to make that decision, and that's what we have pledged to do.
We stand for being out, but we still want to go for the referendum. We want the people to decide.
So your party's policy is for a referendum.
Yes,
if, for instance,
quite happy to have a referendum.
If there were to be an unlikely but not electorally or constitutionally impossible majority for UKIP in the new House of Commons, your policy would be to go for a referendum rather than immediate withdrawal from the European Union?
Yes, we stand for referenda straight across most of our policies, and we're quite happy to have a referendum on Europe.
You just have a referendum on all of your policies.
So,
we will be getting a vote on how much we're spending on schools or the NHS.
There's a lot of policies that we stand for local referenda on, where we could say that there's particularly sensitive policies or sensitive issues that people have where we get asked these questions and we would put it down to local referendum. For argument's sake, fox hunting.
Well, so again, fox hunting is not an absolute central issue. Perhaps it's more about the souls of the parties than anything else. But that's an advocacy of very direct local democracy, Christine. Not attracted to Conservatives. Conservatives, by definition, don't like being governed. Would local democracy and referendum be a good idea?
Well, the cost alone would be astronomical. I mean, you know, leaving aside the fact that as you yourself said about the amount of laws that are passed, it's just not possible to have a referendum on everything. And if you are thinking about everything, even things as supposedly kind of small and irrelevant as fox hunting, you would have referenda on health, presumably, on education. I mean, the cost would be extraordinary.
No, it's on health and education. We're quite clear. We're quite clear that we'll put £3 billion into the NHS. We're quite clear that we would restructure the NHS. We're quite clear on education to bring back grammar schools, and we're quite clear to obviously let people flourish within education. Education, a big issue in Hull.
We'll come back to some of those issues in the second half, but just on referenda, and I thank you both for using the correct plural. Is a referendum not by definition a diminishment of parliamentary sovereignty, and parliamentary sovereignty, by definition, what it is that you most wish to protect?
Well, I totally agree with you. Yes, it may diminish some issues if we was going to go on the bigger issues, but on sensitive issues where in different areas of this great nation, different views take place, and that's the issue where we would say that we'd have to go to local referendum.
The bigger issues should be reserved to an elite of a representatively elected parliament, but the smaller issues should be going
and I'm sure if the elected MPs was in touch with their electorate in their constituencies, they would be able to vote accordingly.
What do you reckon, Christine?
Well-
It's rather attractive. It's sort of an ancient Athenian-style democracy. We'll all gather in the marketplace and debate eruditely.
Well, I mean, it goes back to the cost, I guess, for me, is, you know, we are living in times of austerity. We cannot afford having a local referenda on, you know, small issues. I mean, I appreciate that it may sound attractive, but you know, the larger parties have a mandate, they have clearly set out policies, and people know what they're voting for. And I appreciate that with UKIP, they don't necessarily know what they're voting for, and it might give you an opportunity kind of to put the local position. But again, if you had a referenda, what if Halton Price and Howden or East Hull voted against fox hunting and West Hull and Hessel voted in favour of fox hunting? What would you do in that scenario?
Well, we'd have to take it regionally, surely. It would have to be a regional issue.
Would you stop the foxes from jumping over from one line to the other?
I don't think so.
They could gain sanctuary as they cross the line at one point. Incidentally, what is the UKIP view on fox hunting?
My view.
No, the UKIP view.
Yeah, again, it'd go out to local referenda.
A local referendum.
Local
right then,
referenda. Let the people decide on what they want.
What's your view then, Richard? Just
My
quickly, as we come up to the-
personal view is that I'm against it.
And this is a bit of a bellwether issue, I suppose, yours, Christine?
It is, and I'm not really, I'm fairly on the fence about it. It's not something that's really a major issue in East Hull.
No.
It's not something that I've had any
It's not a lot of-
constituents talk
No,
about with
Not
me.
a lot of hunts
No,
going
no.
through East Hull.
So, you know, I'm prepared to debate.
We
but
must
yes.
we must stop there. Thank you very much. I'll be back after the break with two of the candidates for East Hull. Welcome back to Hot Topic. I'm still with the two of the candidates for the Hull East constituency, Richard Barrett for UKIP and Christine Mackay for the Conservatives. We've spoken a lot about the European Union in the first half, Richard. I hope enough to satisfy you. Christine, can I talk a little bit about economics now? The coalition of which your party is the leader has imposed a strict policy of austerity. It might not have hurt very much in Kent and Hampshire, but it's hurt here in Hull, hasn't it?
Well, when you look back, I mean, I appreciate it's hard times for everybody. When you look back, when Labour had, Labour had 13 years, and we had two ministers in this city. We had John Prescott, we had, Alan Johnson. And what did they do for the city? We've only just had the announcement of the electrification of the railway, and John Prescott was the transport minister at the time, for goodness sake. So, I mean, you have to look at what's happened in this area since the coalition government led by the Conservatives. We've had investment in fiscal policy and industrial policy that's brought Siemens to the area. I mean, don't be fooled that Labour brought Siemens. I mean, it's industrial policy.
Well,
and
I won't be
policy,
fooled, but I won't be fooled that the Liberal Dem coalition brought Siemens either. Siemens are here
It's a
because
business
there's a piece
decision.
of geography here, which means that this is the right place
But
for
it's-
them to exploit the wind power.
Well,
it's not. They didn't come here because of which political party is sitting in Westminster.
Absolutely precisely, and yet you would imagine that was the case. If you read, for example, the Labour webs and blogs, you would think that it was Labour who brought Siemens, and in fact, economics played a major role in that. Businesses come because it's beneficial for them, it's profitable for them. The tax works for them. We've got the lowest corporation tax in the G20, and all of these things serve to bring industries like Siemens to Hull. So that's the first thing. In terms of local level, we've also invested in not just the electrification but other transport infrastructure. We've halved the tolls on the Humber Bridge, for example, and that's had a major impact on local transport links. So I think, and we've had grants in education to support the green port. So I would disagree with you that that Hull has had a disproportionate impact from the austerity. I would say as well that in terms of jobs and job creation, 3 out of 4 of the jobs have been outside of the London area. So, I mean, there has been a balanced kind of growth across the country.
Richard, Hull's had a complete economic bonanza. We've never known it so good under the coalition government. Why on earth would you wish to replace it?
All right. Okay. Well, the fact that there's such a bonanza, we've now lost £160 million as a council budget within the area. for Hull. And we're having to go and echo that to the people that are actually on the streets at this moment in time. So the booming bonanza, as you say, Hugh, it isn't there, I'm afraid.
What exactly is the UKIP economic policy?
In terms of what?
Well, what would you do? Would your attitude to the deficit, to the debt, your attitude, I suppose most importantly, to taxation?
Quite clearly, we must make sure that we balance the books. We can't keep on spending as the previous government did, the Labour government did for 13 years. We can't spend the way they did. But ultimately, obviously, yet the Conservatives still haven't got hold of the deficit. So we must do something to make sure that we do that. But when we're spending the likes of £9 billion in foreign aid, when we're struggling at home, I appreciate that obviously with us being such an advanced nation we should be spending that, but when we're spending that kind of money we need to be reeling those kind of costs in. So when we're spending 16.5 billion on the European Union, we need to be reining that in and we need to be using this money to obviously to tackle the deficit. So as far as economic policy goes, is that this money would help towards actually controlling that deficit.
But the money that we'd save from withdrawing from the European Union, just in the fees that it costs to presumably run the bureaucracy of the European Union.
Don't forget we would then also be able to trade with the rest of the world without having to go through the European Union. We'd also be able to start talking about our emerging markets like India and China, and we'll be able to do trade with them as well.
First of all, can we not trade with the rest of the world already?
Yes, we can if we go through the European Union, and we go through the European Union and the bureaucrats that's there. You
spoke of trading with other markets, the emerging markets, India, Brazil, and you were critical, I think, of overseas aid. Is not the purpose of overseas aid in order to prime the pump of distant economies so that they can become rich enough to be our export markets?
When you've got an Indian finance minister telling us that we don't need this money, and they are showcasing a £750 million space programme, and over the last 5 years the Conservative government have given them £1.5 trillion.
Christine, it has been a priority of this coalition government to maintain sort of a guaranteed ring-fenced foreign aid payment. That's obviously more of an issue for UKIP than it is perhaps for other parties, but is that justifiable?
Well, if we can just go back to what you were saying about the deficit before moving on to
of course.
that since this government has been in, the deficit has been halved. Mm-hmm. There have been several external factors that have, meant that we've still got a way to go, including the spike in oil prices, for example, that has impacted massively.
So you mean the downward spike in oil prices?
Yes. Yeah. So obviously, there are factors beyond our control, but in terms of kind of linking, the council in Hull's cuts and say kind of, I don't know, implying that the foreign aid budget in India is somehow kind of prioritised over the council budget in Hull. It's a complete red herring. It's that
so why is the council £160 million short per year that's not coming from Westminster?
So Francis Maude has made cuts across the board. We are living in times of austerity. We cannot afford everything. And you look to other councils. This is not a Hull thing. This is across the board. People are having to make difficult choices and difficult decisions, as you will know as a councillor. Yep. But the fact remains that the deficit has come down by half. Only if we reduce expenditure can we generate income and revenue that pays for our health service, that pays for our public sector spending. This isn't free money. It doesn't come out of thin air.
Richard, would your party, were it to gain power, would it reduce taxation?
We said that we would raise the tax threshold to £13,000 without paying tax. 2 days later at a Conservative conference, they come and said that they would raise it to £12,500. So it's easy to come and attack UKIP regarding their policies, but it seems that Conservatives seem to follow, maybe because of UKIP's challenge.
Well, I mean, I'm not suggesting that Conservatives are plagiarising UKIP's policies,
no.
But just in a wider view of the party's attitude to the electorate, are the Conservatives being pulled to the right by the UKIP threat?
I don't think they are at all. No, I think the UKIP are, you know, taking votes from Labour on the left, as well as, you know, taking votes from Conservative. What we do know for sure is that come May the 7th, there'll be two choices. It'll be Ed Miliband or it'll be David Cameron. That's who'll be in number 10. And maybe Ed Miliband will be, you know, Nigel Farage hasn't ruled out, you know, supporting Ed Miliband. Neither has, you know, the SNP. But the bottom line is, if you vote for UKIP, you know, you will not get UKIP in number 10. You will get maybe Ed Miliband. So I disagree completely. You know, we see around here, I mean, Richard will tell you, you are not taking votes from the Conservatives in Hull, are you?
No, we're
you
not.
are taking them from Labour. This
Yes,
is not,
we are.
no.
Well, this is where that we get to play the interesting game of electoral speculation. If you were to have, say, 15, 20 seats even in the new House of Commons, including yours, Richard, Nigel Farage has said that he'd ally in coalition or in a minority, supporting minority government, or just a supply and confidence arrangement with Labour or with the Conservatives. Which would you prefer?
As far as Nigel Farage is concerned, he's our leader and he'll decide when it comes down to after the election. If we have the balance of power, we need to be discussing with the people that are prepared to give us that referendum.
Well, that's more likely to be the Conservatives who've already said they want a referendum than it is the Labour Party, isn't it? So are you suggesting that what you're hoping for is a Conservative UKIP coalition or UKIP arrangement of some sort?
As far as we're concerned, we need that in our referendum, and we will talk to who we need to talk to regarding that in our referendum.
Christine, your party is likely, if it's to be either in opposition facing an arrangement between Labour and the SNP, the Scottish National Party, who've said they're certainly not going to come into an arrangement with the Conservatives.
That's right.
How comfortable would you or David Cameron be sharing a cabinet table with UKIP?
Well, I mean, first of all, like all parties, we're in it to win it. You know, it's you know, so I don't really want to think about, you know, coming second or third. You know,
It'd be
maybe second.
good idea to be thinking ahead, don't you think?
But I will. Well, we think ahead. We've got our long-term economic plan, for example, which we really, you know, we think 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. So we certainly are thinking ahead in that respect. But as Richard's, if Richard's party's red line is the party who will give you a referendum on Europe, Labour have categorically ruled it out.
Mm-hmm.
The Lib Dems have categorically ruled it out. So, you know, so you must be saying that your preference.
Richard,
would be
one
Conservative.
Labour's attitude in the first place was we need to be in Europe. At all costs we need to be at Europe. But now UKIP are challenging and we're taking votes off Labour. Labour then followed us down the route and saying, well, we need to reform.
One final point, Richard, about your party before we will have to stop.
Yes.
Various statements not from the headquarters official of your party, but from various individual members about flooding being caused by gay marriage, send all the immigrants home, some ambiguous statements about the NHS recently. Your party is full of quite strange people, isn't it?
No, I don't think so. I think we've got an array of talent throughout the party. There has been individuals that have spoke out with sometimes ridiculous statements. However, we are a party that represents people, and there is all sorts of walks of life throughout our nation, and we get that sometimes in the party.
And on that note, I'm afraid both of you are going to have to stop. Thank you both very much for coming in. Christine Mackay and Richard Barrett. That's all we have time for. Please join me for the next Hot Topic election special. For now, goodbye.